How's it going? I'm Eddie, and I'm making a final project for my Python class right now. So let's get started. So I decided to make a login prompt. So we're going to ask them for a username, password, and then we can check a database that we make later if that username and password combination exists. And then if so, we can authenticate them. So we can log them in. And then later, if we're feeling a challenge, I'm going to remake the entire program using object-oriented programming, which is the idea of using classes and methods to compartmentalize your code, to prevent repeated code and to group things together in a different way. Let's get started. Let's make a new main.py. And this is where we'll put our code. Let's make a simple menu. We can make some options in our menu. Sign in, create account, and exit. So if we run this, this will prompt the user to type something, and we can type one of those and it'll bring us to a new menu. So let's program that now. So I'll make a new variable called user input. So what this does is prompts the user to type something and then turns that into a string and saves it inside a variable called user input. So now we can check what user input is. If user input is 1, that's our sign-in page. Please type your username. And now we can ask the user for their username. So username equals string input. So now we need to check if the username is inside of our database, but we don't have a database yet. So let's go ahead and make a pretty simple one. I'm going to make a dictionary called accounts. So this is how you make a dictionary. So let's make a fake user. So I'll call it Eddie. My password will be password. So I can write if username in accounts, print your account exists, else print wrong. So let's run this. So I'll press 1. It'll say sign in. Please type your username. Eddie, your account exists because it's in the database. So if we run it again, sign in, and I type something else, it'll say wrong. So now we have a way of checking to see if our username is inside the list of usernames, right? Which is the keys in our key value pairs. So what if I wanted to keep asking over and over? So if the account doesn't exist, we want to ask them for another username. So we can just put this inside of a loop. So while, right? And then if it exists, we can break out of that loop, or else we can do the loop again. So if we run this, I'll press sign in. I'll type a fake username. If we hit enter, it'll ask again, and it'll keep asking until we type a real one. So now let's do the exact same thing, but with the password. So let's just copy this. Please type your password. So now we'll have to change this section a little bit. So password in accounts username. So what this does is we've already given it the key in the dictionary, but we want to check the user typed in to the value of whatever key was before. So what password was associated with that username? Print logged in. So let's see. Sign in. Please type your username. Type the wrong password, but if I type the right one, then we're logged in. So what if I want the screen to clear in between each menu so it kind of stays in the same place? So clearing the screen on different operating systems is actually slightly different. So we're going to have to account for that. I'll first import the library called OS. This lets us talk to our operating system. So now I can say if OS name is NT, is what Windows is called under the hood. We can type, I think, os.systemcls. So that's the command to clear the screen on Windows. Else, we can do os.systemclear. So other operating systems usually use the word clear instead of CLS. So if we run our program, you see how it cleared the console before it ran? But what if we want to clear with every menu? So we can actually turn this into a function. So def clear screen, and we can put this in there. So every time we do clear screen, it will clear the screen. So we've essentially added our own command into Python here because we don't want to have to write this big thing every time. So I can say every time one of these menus appears, we can clear the screen. So main menu, I'll go to 1. And then it cleared the screen, type the username, and it cleared the screen and quickly drew the next menu on top of it. So let's go ahead and make a account creation screen. So we'll go ahead and copy this. If user input is 2, we'll clear the screen and I'll make this say create account. So we need to switch these because we want usernames to be unique because we're saving this in a dictionary and all of the keys need to be unique. So we don't want 2 accounts with the same name. And then we'll do this. So create account, copy that. please type your desired password. So we can do accounts username equals password. So we save a new key value pair to the dictionary accounts called username, and its value is whatever the user typed in. So let's do it. So if I press 2, we can create an account. So if I try to type Eddie, that account already exists, so it's not going to let us do that. If I write Bob here, now it'll let us continue. Type your desired password, Bob password. There we go. So now we're logged in, and it added it to our dictionary. The problem is it's not bringing us back to the main menu, so we need to put the entire program inside of a loop. So once they create the account, it'll boot them back to the menu, and they can try logging in, and we can see if it works. So we'll put everything inside one of these. I'll take everything and indent it once. So now that we have our whole program inside of a loop, we can try running it. So if we create an account, call it Bob, password, now we're logged in. And when we hit enter, it'll bring us back to the main menu. And we can try to sign in now. So Bob, password, now it worked. But hey, when we start the program again and we try to type Bob, it doesn't remember us. That's because it was saved to RAM. We actually need to save the list of usernames and passwords somewhere on your disk so it doesn't disappear when the program ends. Let's go ahead and add that functionality. So instead of saving it to a dictionary, we can actually save it to a file. So there's a file type called .json that lets us save key value pairs in a file. And that's pretty good for saving things like dictionaries. So let's go ahead and create a file called accounts.json. So here we can define our accounts. I'll make an account called Eddie, and its password will be password. And then if I want to make another account, I can write Bob, password, and we need to separate them with commas. Let's go ahead and read this file. We're going to first need the library called JSON, import JSON, and right here where we read the accounts, we can get rid of that and let's write our own logic. So this is with open accounts.json, and we have to open it in read mode because we're reading stuff in. And then this prevents bugs I was having earlier where we have to do encoding, and then we have to set a specific encoding. So text encoding actually differs depending on what operating system you use. Python will default to something else, depending on if you're on Windows or if you're on Mac or Linux, it changes. So we want to make sure our script is cross-platform, which means that it'll work on any type of device. So we need to force the JSON file to be always the exact same as file. Accounts equals JSON load file. So what this will do, anything inside this with block will assume that this file is open. We'll read accounts.json in the same folder as wherever the script is, and we'll take all of the stuff in there and put it into the dictionary called accounts. So if I try it now, if I type Eddie, it does see that our account exists. And if we try Bob, same thing. The problem is, if this accounts.json doesn't exist, our program crashes. So if I go ahead and rename accounts.json to something else and run it, our program will crash and say, hey, that file doesn't exist. So we need to make sure that it checks to see if it exists. And then if it doesn't, we're going to make a new one that's blank. So it'll try to read accounts.json. But if it doesn't see it, we're going to do whatever's in the except here. So this is catching any errors. So if there's any error with that section of code, instead of crashing, it'll go into our except section. So we'll make a blank accounts, and then we'll say the same thing, but we'll write to it instead. So W here, because we want to save into that file. We do JSON.dump, and then the name of our dictionary is accounts. And the name of the file, I think, is file. And then online, I read if we want to make our file consistent, we can do indent equals 4 and ensure ASCII equals false. So what this does is makes it so all indents are always exactly 4 spaces long, which is what Python and JSON both expect. So just in case it's saved weird, it will force that. And then ensure ASCII means that it'll use our UTF-8 encoding here. So there are different competing formats for saving text on the computer. The really old way is called ASCII. But the problem with that, it can only save uppercase, lowercase, and numbers only in English. So if someone were to type in a symbol from another language or an emoji or something, our program wouldn't be able to save it to the file and we might have problems. So we want to make sure that it doesn't use ASCII. It's going to use our special encoding here called UTF-8. So let's try this now. So we're going to delete accounts.json and let's see if we start the program. there we go. It made a blank accounts.json for us. So next we need to make sure we save whenever an account is created. So let's go ahead and copy this and put that next to the save code right here. So now if we look, our accounts.json is blank. If we create an account called Eddie with the password, I didn't even have to do anything to the database. It automatically put it inside accounts.json for us. So one feature that I want to do is let the users go back a menu if they don't want to be in that menu. So let's say I'm in the login screen and I'm on the password screen. Oh, actually, I don't want to log in. I want to go back to the main menu. I want them to be able to do that. So let's add some more loops here. So I'm going to make a Boolean called back. And whenever this is true, we're going to go back a menu instead of continuing. So we can check here if username is back, then we can break. So let's check. So if I type back as my username, no. So let's see what I did wrong here. So it looks like I needed to check first. There we go. So I need to do that for each of the sections of the program. Cool. So we just made a login prompt. So it'll check the username and password against a list. And if it's in there, it'll log them in. And then if they create an account, it'll do the opposite. If it's not in the list, we'll add it to that list. So if we look in accounts.json, there's actually a problem with this. It's actually not best practice to save passwords in plain text like this, because anybody could just open accounts.json and see what the passwords are. So what we're going to do is actually take the hash of the password instead and check that against what the user typed in. So what that means is the user will make a password in the create screen and it'll scramble it and then save it into passwords.json. And it'll do that in a consistent way. So every time that same thing is typed in, it'll produce the same scrambled nonsense, right? So if we just scramble or hash what the user typed in and then compare it to the hashed version in accounts.json, we can actually check passwords without ever knowing what they are, without ever saving them somewhere. So I found online this library called Argon2. So what this does is implements a specific hashing algorithm called Argon2 that's pretty good. And it lets us turn strings into hashed versions of the strings. So to install this, we'll open up a terminal and we'll type pip as the name of the package manager, kind of like the App Store for Python, install, and then the name of the library we want to install is called Argon2-CFFI. But there's a lot of different ones that exist that encrypt it in a different way, but this is just the one I chose. So we can press enter, and now we've installed it. So the docs want me to do from Argon2 import password hasher. So let's go down to where we save the passwords to accounts.json. So right here. So first, before we add it to our dictionary, let's hash it. So what we're doing is we're making a new variable called hashed password, and we're using this function of the library we just installed. And we're putting the password the user just typed in there. So this should be hashed. And then instead of saving the original password, we can save hashed password. So let's delete accounts.json and let's try to make a new account. Create account, Eddie, password, logged in. So if we go to accounts.json, instead of saving just the word password here, it saved the hash. So this is scrambled in a way that it's not easily reversible. Sometimes not possible at all to reverse, depending on how the algorithm works. So let's go to the login section. Now we'll say if hashed password is in accounts. Let's try it. So sign in, Eddie, password. Nope. So what did we do wrong here? So this actually doesn't work. Normally we'd type a string, it would get scrambled and then saved. And then for a given string, if it's the exact same string, you'll get the exact same hash out. But that's actually not the case with the algorithm I chose. The one that I chose does something special called seeding. So what that is, it stores a random number alongside your string and then saves it. So even if the word password, right here, I'll even demonstrate. If I make a new account called Bob and type the exact same password, if we look in accounts.json, these aren't exactly the same thing. With other hashing algorithms, it would be. So this is implemented to prevent a couple different types of attacks to getting into people's passwords. One of them is called rainbow tables. So this prevents people saving big lists of hashes and trying to figure out what hashes go with what strings. So actually this stumped me for a while, and I actually figured it out by reading the documentation that came with the library. So we actually have to do passwordhasher.verify, and then we'll type in the hash and then the string that we want to check to see if they match. So this is supposed to return true or false, like a Boolean, but instead, if it's true, then it runs fine. But if it's false, it crashes. It returns an error instead. So I have to put this inside a try except to prevent the program from crashing. So now let's see if this works. I hope this works. First, I need to type the username, password. There we go. Now we got it. So even though these have the same password, the hash is different because all of the hashes are seeded. So we have a database of usernames and passwords that's extra secure. So the next steps for a project like this could be to save all of the usernames and passwords on a server. So not on this computer, so over a network or over the internet. But you could have two versions of your program. You could have the client, which is what the end users see, like us, that we interact with. And then the server is actually what our client talks to grab information from. Or you could use an existing database solution like MariaDB. MySQL is pretty good. So to do stuff like that, you'd have to learn SQL, or SQL is a language that's just for querying databases. So just for asking information from a database, and it'll return all the information. So we would ask for a user, hey, does this username match anything in there? And then it would answer, but it's in a different way. So that'd be something useful to learn. So I actually made another version of this program that uses object-oriented programming instead, but I didn't get very far. I'm not very good. But I think I tried to be too ambitious. I wanted to save all of the menus in a text file, but I wanted to do it in a fancy way. It didn't end up working. So this is the same thing. I have a class called Save Manager that manages saving and loading from the JSON file. I have a way to read the list of accounts into variables. I have another class called Menu Manager that I didn't finish that makes the menus appear. So I don't have a visual way to do this in the program yet, but I can do savemanager.addAccount, and we can pass in two arguments, the username we want and the password we want. So test user, test password, and it hashed the password for us. So the only thing we had to write was add account, and then that's it. So this makes our main program much easier to read by using methods like this. So here's all the same code that we wrote earlier, but it's just inside of a method, which is a function inside of a class. So we have a method called read, the same thing as our other program, try to open the accounts.json. If it doesn't exist, then we'll make one and return the list of accounts. Same for write and add account. So there's my program. I hope this shows that even a simple login prompt can lead you down all these different rabbit holes and teach you a lot about computer science. All right, thank you for watching.